Chairman Wright of the Wildlife Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, we'll call Chief of Wildlife, Mr. Joe Benedict.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Commissioners. It's my pleasure to introduce the next two speakers for the Wildlife Committee. The first, as Director Maxidon mentioned, our partners and friends from Ducks Unlimited Canada. They came down. I think they may have been part of bringing this weather down, so we're thankful for them coming down. You guys know DU Dave. That's what y'all have called him for, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 years now. We've also got Howie Singer. He's going to be giving the presentation. He's taken over this role for Dave. But the Fall Flights program, Howie will go through that, but it's basically where the agency and commission together send money to Canada to invest in breeding grounds so that the ducks that we have to harvest come back in good numbers. So that's the Fall Flight program in a nutshell. After that conclusion of that presentation, as the director mentioned, we have Dr. Brad Cohen here to share a little bit about the Mallard telemetry research project that's been going on for 6 years now, I believe. A lot of good data from that project, and you've seen this, I think, annually ever since we began that. So anyway, without further ado, I invite Howie Singer to come, and I guess Dave Kostersky as well. Excellent.
Joe, how many times did you practice saying his name so you could get it right? Okay.
Maybe he'll say it one more time for you all.
No, I'm not going to say my name. I'm pretty good at it. Thanks, Chairman, Commission, Director. Greatly appreciate the time. You guys have been extremely generous with time for us on your agendas to provide these updates, to come share what we're up to, but also to thank you for your partnerships. Recently, I got a promotion to be National Director of Continental Programs, and so we've been mentoring Howie to take over the State Partnership Program for DU Canada, and that's what he's going to be doing today. So this is really a handoff and not a farewell from my part. I'll definitely be involved. I'm still involved in all the Continental Program work that we do. But we needed someone that's got the time and the maybe a little younger energy than I'm heading towards. I think other people can relate. And so thank you again from the bottom of my heart for all your hospitality as I come down here, and look forward to seeing you in Canada again someday.
Thanks, Dave. And thanks everybody for having us come down here. I echo everything Dave said. So I'll jump right into it. As Dave mentioned, my name is Howie Singer. I'm with Ducks Unlimited Canada, the manager of state partnerships. I've been with the company for about 10 years. I started off as a research biologist, did that for about 5 years. In the last 5 years, I did research biology and also helped Dave with the state partnership program. And this is my first year kind of full-time managing the state partnership program. So what is Ducks Unlimited Canada? We're a science-based organization. And what that means is we use the most cutting-edge research. We have our own team of scientists. They're based in Manitoba, but spread across Canada from coast to coast and from the US border with the prairies all the way up into the Arctic. We lead research programs with partnerships with universities, state agencies like yourselves, federal agencies, and a slew of others. Over the last about 30 years, the Institute for Wetland and Waterfowl Research, which is our research team, has published over 800 peer-reviewed papers, and all of those have numerous partnerships involved with them. And so we use the science to help us inform the conservation decisions that we do across the prairies, the boreal forest, and both coasts. So Ducks Unlimited, for 2 consecutive years now, has led the highest charity rating for nonprofit companies across Canada. I think this speaks volumes to what we do, how we treat our employees, and their overall success of our efforts. And the categories that this is based on are people leadership. We have a great leadership team. Dave's a part of that. Workplace satisfaction. Our offices are dog friendly. There's a lot of camaraderie. A lot of great relationships are built there. It's a really engaging community. And that it speaks also to the employee engagement aspect. And then the social responsibility. I really think that's what we do on the landscape. We're doing habitat conservation that benefits people, it benefits wildlife, it benefits watersheds, it's making the environment a better place for everybody. And then governance and transparency. I think this last year in 2024, So our fiscal years go from April until March. I think it was 90 cents of every dollar that was given to Ducks Unlimited Canada was used for on-the-ground conservation work. I think that's really amazing to see that every year. And that's what we strive for, is that about 90 cents on the dollar. And so really, this is what it boils down to. Jason mentioned this just a few minutes ago. Dave mentioned this, partnerships, international partnerships, local partnerships, everything, state partnerships. This is how we can get to long-term conservation benefits. So the Fall Flights program, it initiated in 1991, part of the NAWAMP, which was the North American Waterfowl Management Plan. That was an international plan that said basically, like, we realized duck numbers are low in the 1980s. We'd like to find a way to increase populations and maintain those at long-term averages. And the realization was about 60 to 70% of ducks annually come from Canada, and a lot of them from the prairies. So we had to find a mechanism how to fund habitat conservation work in Prairie, Canada. Ducks Unlimited had been there since 1938. NAWAMP happened. There was this huge pot of money from the North American Wetland Conservation Act, also known as NACA. So the mechanism to fund that is the Fall Flights program. That's ran through an association in the US called the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. And basically what it is, it's trying to get states involved and to understand that these birds are coming from Canada. Dollars that are raised from duck stamp sales could go to Canada and could be used to basically to do habitat conservation work. And with that, the return on that is you're gonna get ducks coming down during the fall migration. And one of the great benefits with this Fall Flights program is the exchange rate and the match dollars that are associated with it. So every dollar that Tennessee commits to the Fall Flights program, it gets matched with Ducks Unlimited dollar per dollar. And then Ducks Unlimited can go get NACA dollars at a 2-to-1 ratio. So $1 that Tennessee puts in becomes $4 US. And then with the favorable exchange rate over the last 15, 20 years of this program, that $1 becomes about 5.5 Canadian dollars for habitat conservation work. And the science that we do tells us where are you going to get the best return on your investment. And I'll actually go through some slides later on that kind of show how our science team has taken all the data they've collected, economics data, and put that into a return on investment for each dollar that's invested in Canada. And so this last year, FY24, all 48 states were involved with the program. It was over $5.1 million, which equated to about 26 million Canadian dollars in habitat conservation work across Canada. And so for this last year, we currently have over 13,500 projects that are kind of under management right now. Since existence, 9.2 million acres conserved and restored. I think there's about 6 million acres that are currently active, and 244 million acres are influenced. And the influenced acres there, a lot of those have to do with huge partnerships across the boreal forest with industry partners as well. This last year in Manitoba, for example, was a 22 million acres influenced in the boreal forest that was working with logging and oil and gas partners there to kind of protect some of the wetlands that weren't currently under protection. And so now getting into more home here for you all. This last year, $166,000 was matched by Ducks Unlimited. And then you can see the NACA gain, that's the double. And then the exchange gain was $192,000. So almost $900,000 from Tennessee's generous contribution of $166,000. So this alone, I think, is a great return to get $5 for every dollar you're investing in habitat conservation. And then we'll get into kind of the duck side of that and the habitat side of that here going forward. So each year, we track all of our acres for each of the habitat programs that we do across the prairies. And then we want to report back to you guys with all of this information every year to show what we've done with the money. So I can just kind of go through those briefly. They're a little bit hard to see there. The first one, land acquisition. So Ducks Unlimited Canada will buy and hold land, and our name is on the title of it. We manage the land the best we can for habitat for wildlife and particularly waterfowl. Conservation easements, those are easements in perpetuity. So what those are, they're called no break and no drain. So on a conservation easement, we work with the landowner, we pay them to put the easement on there. And that ensures that all the wetlands and all the upland habitat will stay as breeding waterfowl habitat and won't be cropped. And then revolving land purchase, kind of a unique program. We'll go in, buy a piece of land in an area where there's potentially some high probability that could be converted and staying in crop. We'll buy the piece of land, we'll put it into upland habitat, which is good nesting habitat for waterfowl. If the wetlands need to get restored, we'll restore the wetlands. And then we put a conservation easement on it, and then we'll sell that to a cattle producer. Cattle producers typically aren't doing a lot of grain farming. They want the grasslands on there, they want the wetlands. So it's a really kind of unique program that we do across Prairie, Canada. And then the easements from RLP, that's the next line down. That's just putting conservation easements on that program. And then conservation agreements, these are typically 10-year programs. Some of them are landowners that they have grasslands on there. We want to keep those grasslands there. It's a really low cost program. We'll pay the landowner an amount per acre. And for 10 years, they have to keep that grassland intact. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody. And then long-term lease, we don't do a lot of that there in the prairies, but we do some. And that's where we basically have control of the land and can make the decisions, manage the habitat the way we want it versus an easement where the landowner can manage it. They could graze it if they want with more cattle. We do try to promote, though, rotational grazing, things like that, that are most beneficial for the habitat. So then moving down to habitat restoration, conservation forages. So we work with landowners who are interested in converting land that might be cropped annually into land that's perennially cultivated. So it'll be an alfalfa mix with some grasses and legumes in there. And then that'll be more beneficial for waterfowl than an annually cropped piece of land. Fall cereals, a kind of neat program. DU Canada worked with the University in Lethbridge about 25, 30 years ago to develop varieties of, originally it was winter wheat. So wheat that's seeded in the prairies, usually about September, October. And what that does, that greens up earlier in the springtime. Equipment's not in the field, and particularly for pintail, one of the nesting species that comes up to Canada real early in the spring, they have this really nice lush green stand that they can go nest in. And I think some of the research that Ducks Unlimited found, it's up to 24 times better nesting potential in winter wheat versus spring cultivated lands. That's the fall cereals program. And then planted nesting cover. That's on lands that we purchase where we can go in and we can use our own mix of grasses and legumes that are particular for the area, the soil type. And so it just kind of enhances the upland habitat to the best ability for waterfowl. And then because we have a ton of projects, like I said, 13,000 projects, we have a lot of habitat management work that needs to be done in these lands. So we have the portfolio in Saskatchewan. I think it's just over 1 million acres of land right now that we try to manage on an annual basis to make sure it's kept up. We do haying and grazing tenders with landowners, and then just keep the wetlands there and the grasslands intact. So these are kind of some new slides that our science team has been working with. This is all about increasing the return on investment from duck production. I'm probably going to get a few of these slides mixed up. I just got these recently, so I'll be happy to talk with folks later about these in more detail when I can see my slide notes, because that was really going to help me on these. But basically what it is, it's kind of hard to see up there. The bars on the left, the black bars, so this is what we consider random acts of conservation. So if you just went on the landscape and decided to do conservation work anywhere, this is what your return is going to be. The bar next to it, the gray bar, this is with if you use the DUC approach. So we have landscapes in the prairies called target landscapes. We know that there are high densities of breeding waterfowl in these landscapes, and we have an idea of the programs that work there for waterfowl, as we did some studies in the early 2000s over a decade to say that, you know, that dense nesting cover is a really good idea in this type of landscape, or haying is a really good idea in this type of landscape. So the bar on the left there, the first one, that's a dense nesting cover. So if you just did that randomly across the landscape, you would see that there's just a slight increase in hatch nests of about, you know, call it 3.5. But if you actually use the DUC approach, where we're focusing on certain landscapes with high breeding densities of pairs, you're actually going to get closer to like 13 nests, additional nests using that approach. Then the same thing you see with haying, pasture, and slightly more with winter wheat. Yeah, so this is one example here. So the haying and forage program, over the course of a year on that 320 acre section, so that'd be a mile by a half mile block. The prairies are all in the quarter sections. You're gonna have almost 15,000 additional ducks from 1 year of the forage program by using the DUC targeted approach in the target landscapes versus just doing it randomly across the prairies. So this just kind of speaks to Ducks Unlimited wanting to ensure that, you know, dollars invested in the prairies are being used to the best possible way using the science that we know. And then so here's kind of breaking down the more economic side of things for the return on investment. So across the top is the cost for 100 additional hatched nests in US dollars or 360 ducks. And then you can kind of see, I think the biggest highlights here, I can't point up there, but if you just pick the first row across the top, the forage program, for example, you can see if you use random acts of conservation, what the costs are for those 360 ducks. You're looking at $110,000. But if you use the DUC approach, you know, it's only $20,000. So this targeted approach is much better way to spend dollars in the prairies by using the science that we've done. So it's a savings of $90,000. And the kind of same holds true for conservation easement. That's one of our biggest programs across the prairies. It's about 2.8 million. If you're just doing it randomly, you know, talking with a landowner anywhere in Canada versus, you know, focusing on a landscape where there might be 40 pairs or 60 pairs per square mile, there's a savings of almost $3 million. So that's just kind of one neat tool that we use. And this tool, we can use this with every program that we deliver across the prairies. So that's kind of all the slides that I have about the Fall Flights program and the conservation work that we do. And I just like to show this slide because this really kind of gives us a picture of what it's going to look like next year on the breeding grounds. So that dark blue and the purple and the green, this is all above average precipitation as of 2 days ago. So the prairies do look pretty wet right now. I mean, if we get a few more snowstorms before spring runoff and a nice slow runoff, there should be a lot of wetlands in some of the highest breeding duck densities in Saskatchewan, which have some of the highest breeding duck densities in Prairie Canada as well. So kind of a good outlook right now. Hopefully it keeps up. And I believe that is my last one. So I'd like to say thank you very much for having us come here today. And thanks for helping out and getting us out on a hunt. It was really amazing this morning. And looking forward to continuing our long-term partnership with everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the commission.
Does anybody have any questions for Howie on the presentation?
Let me ask one, please. Howard, you looked at return on investment slide there. Does DU have any measurable return data for over 20 years to see whether we've got more ducks now than we had 20 years ago because of these efforts? Or is it so tied to wet conditions and dry conditions that it's really hard to tell?
Yeah, I think you kind of answered the question there, Bill. It all depends really on what the prairies are doing, you know, over a 4 or 5 year cycle, right? If it's really dry, even though we've conserved a lot of wetlands and a lot of grasslands, there might not be birds using those if you don't have the water. And I would assume there's probably some way we could estimate. I mean, there are some metrics we have for estimating the impact of the work that Ducks Unlimited and other conservation organizations have done. I don't have those in front of me right now, but there is some data out there that show with the habitat work we've done in the prairies, this is what the return has been. And if we hadn't done that, this is what the return had been. So there is a difference in that.
Right. Does DU, I know a few years ago, I know Delta Waterfowl does trapping, predator trapping. Does DU, I think they were doing a little experimental trapping. Is that a program now with DU Canada?
No, DU doesn't do any trapping in the prairies. We allow Delta access to some of the lands that we have in Saskatchewan, and they do some predator trapping and, you know, brood stuff like that. But Ducks Unlimited doesn't actively do any trapping that I'm aware of.
Do you keep up with the production on where the trapping is?
No, Delta usually gives us a kind of an annual update on their research on the lands that we have, but we don't keep up actively on that.
Okay,
No.
thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from the commission? If not, thank you so much for your presentation. Chief Benedict?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'd invite Dr. Brad Cohen from Tennessee Tech University.
Thank you for having me here again, commissioners, and appreciate your time today. I'll try and get us out of here as quick as possible with the storm coming. I'm here to give an update on the Tennessee Mallard project, and just for those new to the commission, it's a long-term project that we've been doing now 6 years. And during that time, we've been putting GPS transmitters on mallards and some other species, incidentally, to understand how mallards move about the landscape in Western Tennessee. Now that we've been doing this so long, we're starting to really get access to data that's starting to inform larger questions, not just like, hey, where are they, but how are they responding to environmental conditions in any good year? You know, what does a cold year do versus a warm year? What does a cold spell in January do to ducks versus a cold spell in November? So let me just give you a little bit more background about the project. And very simply what it is we've got a crew, this project through the funding of TWRA and some funding from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services set to graduate a total right now of 6 different students. And they've had fun trapping, running through the wetlands, and doing stuff that after 2 days of doing, I am sick of doing. So it's been a lot of fun. That's why I spent my time in the office. Okay. But what we really are doing is we're trapping ducks, and we go out there and we catch mallards. And many of you in this room have been with us trapping. And then we put these GPS transmitters on these ducks, and we let them fly away. And these GPS transmitters take a location every hour. And they're solar panels, so they charge, and they text us the data. So we get GPS locations, whether that duck's down in Mexico or up in Canada, it doesn't matter. We know where they are and what they're doing. And while that map doesn't look great with the lighting conditions, this is what the data actually looks like when we put it onto a map. And what you're looking at there is a duck that we got 2 years of data. On average, we get about 2 years of data from each transmitter. And I want you to notice, they fly. Okay, that's awesome. This one, for example, flew 5,000 miles total in a year. Made a trip in 8 hours, covered over 650 miles. Peak speed in one of its return trips was over 100 miles an hour with a good tailwind. That's neat. There's one that decided that track is literally one big circle. For 2 years, it followed its own track back up north and then its own track back down south and wound up back in the same exact spot both times. So we get just this incredible, like, gee whiz type stuff. But when we start to actually break down the data and we look a little closer, we start to get little pieces that tell a bigger story. 25% of our ducks come back to within 15 miles of their previous area. And really 15 miles is an over-exaggeration. Most of this is like they came back to the same spot. So they traveled 2,000 to 3,000 miles up and back only to wind up exactly where they started. 50% come back to about 88 miles, and that's the general area. That's Tennessee, a little bit of Missouri, a little bit of Illinois, a little bit of Arkansas. So they have very high fidelity, and fidelity is basically their ability to return back to where they were. The other thing we notice is they have very constricted ranges. So you're talking about an animal that can fly wherever it wants to, and a range is just the amount of space it's using. This animal can go wherever it wants. And now you're looking at a map of a hen, and that's in Prairie Potholes, that's in Saskatchewan. And look at what this is a hen, that's 3 months of data constrained into, I guess if you doubled that map, it's about 12 miles map size. Spent 3 months right there. Now we're back in Tennessee. Spent 3 months right there. So an animal that can fly far sits relatively still. So we've also got the opportunity to ask, okay, we get these cool migration tracks back down. They're flying down. Here comes fall and winter, and they're flying down. And What makes them stop where they're going to stop? What makes them set up home turf? And so we've looked at that through a variety of different analyses, and I'm going to quickly paraphrase that. We've looked at different parts of the environment: food, safety, water, and a bunch of other things, public land dispositions, heterogeneity in the environment. And what we find time and time again, what matters where a duck is going to set up a spot and call home is the amount of safety that is on the landscape and the amount of water that is there. So water plus safety is what matters where a duck is going to stay. Notice what isn't there is food. And as a biologist, I'm sitting there going, food is definitely something an animal needs. And time again, we cannot get food as measured by duck energy days or energy. That's the amount of, that's how the feds manage waterfowl. But basically, way back when we think that ducks need energy during the winter, so we're going to provide it to them. And yet I can't get it to play out in any of these analyses. Okay, so ducks stop where there is water and there is safety. Something that looks like this landscape. Just water everywhere. And as a biologist, I start thinking about this and I go, okay, duck distributions and movements, where they're going and what they're doing in West Tennessee is a function of hunting pressure, water on the landscape through precipitation and flooding, and food. But it never plays out. So one thing we've been doing during this study is, and we're not just putting out GPS transmitters on these ducks, we're going across the entire study area. And this study area is pretty big. From Reelfoot Lake down to Chickasaw National Wildlife Refuge, over all the way to the far part of the Obion River. So it's a relatively large study area for those that are familiar with West Tennessee, and we're doing on-the-ground assessments of food. So where our ducks go, we follow. And what we're seeing is, what is habitat for a mallard? Well, very simply, you can imagine that they need water. That's open water. That's the rivers and lakes around here. There's woody wetlands. Those are the flooded bottomland hardwoods and cypress swamps of West Tennessee. Then there's moist soil, but not all moist soil is created equal. You've heard moist soil, that word a lot, commissioners, and let me make sure I'm on the same page. Moist soil to the average person looks like weeds. It's a grassy field. But those grasses were historically what most waterfowl needed, and they produce, they're annual plants that produce a lot of seeds. Those seeds are rich in micronutrients, vitamins, and energy, and important for a host of other functions. Within moist soil, there's managed moist soil. And this is specifically like we are going out there to create this community. It's not accidental. We're purposefully manipulating water levels to create this environment. Second to last is a flooded harvested field. This makes up a lot of what we're seeing in West Tennessee. This is basically a crop with something like soybeans. Farmer cuts it out, puts water on it, calls it a day. But then there's also flooded unharvested agriculture. And you can imagine that's flooded corn around here. And if you go up to Illinois, Missouri, maybe a little bit into Arkansas, you'd see flooded corn as the main flooded agricultural crop until you get into flooded rice in Arkansas and Louisiana. And that's a bird's eye view of more flooded cornfields, because you're going to see we've got a lot of them. And that one. And every little spot you see in that water there is harvested ag, and then a flooded cornfield in between, and then there's a hunting blind waiting right there, because we have somehow every hunter now believes that the way I kill ducks is I flood corn and I sit my blind right in the middle of it and I shoot them. We've done some analyses that says, all right, well, what do ducks actually do when they get here? How far are they moving and how far are they selecting? Okay, I want you to think about that. That informs the scale of management that we're doing. How far are they actually perceiving where they can go? And that's a complicated graph, but I just want to show this kind of top part here. And really the key part is a duck, our mallards don't care if it's 600 yards away or 6 miles away. They are just as likely to choose that location. In general, our mallards are setting up home, if you will, home base in a safe area, a refuge. And then they've got about a 6-mile circle around there that they're radiating out from. That's it. Now, it wouldn't be the same if you went to Louisiana. It'd be much bigger. But the quality, the amount of food that's on the landscape, as you're about to see, means 6 miles does it. Oh, I wish that figure popped more, because this is it right here, folks. Okay. That is our study area. Those are the river systems of West Tennessee. This is a gigantic amount of area. And that yellow is all the flooded corn on the landscape. It totals up to something like a little bit over 350 acres on refuges of flooded corn, a little over 250 acres on publicly hunted. So a total of 600 on the public side, not even counting national wildlife refuges. And we can about triple that on private land. So about 1,500 to 1,800 acres a year on private land. Let me just throw some 6-mile buffers around there. A duck would have to try really hard in our area to not find flooded corn. So it shouldn't be a surprise when we do our surveys, and we've done them for 6 years now. Half of our fields typically in our hunted areas have at least some corn left on them. This is looking at corn depletion over time. We've done all these surveys. We've created a rapid assessment. We've done a lot of stuff with this, but basically, refuges. First thing I want you to notice is there's 3 different colors here. There's depletion over time and you got the pink, that's the refuge, and then you got hunted, public and private hunted on top. That's blue and green. You can't really see the difference, but it doesn't matter for this talk. I want you to focus on something, folks. First thing you need to know is that most refuges, their corn amount starts lower. And that's not because of the farmers somehow worse. It's because this is marginal farming land to begin with. It's naturally wet. There's a reason the state was given it in the first place. You can't really grow a crop, but we're going to try. And so then we go through and we throw out the corn and we sometimes have to replant it. And yes, it's it can be an expensive thing. Typically, the difference between corn plantings and something like managed moist soil is a $600 difference per acre on input costs. But we try and, hey, ducks eat it. It's right in front of their face. If you put, like enough rolls in front of me all the time where I'm hanging out, I'm going to munch on them. But once that food is depleted, then they start using hunted land. And then we see a rapid depletion. Generally, it happens around January 1st, where all of a sudden the ducks kind of pivot and start using private land flooded corn. Well, wouldn't you know, it correlates perfectly with the kind of decisions that our mallards are making. So once that flooded ag is removed or depleted from our refuges, what we see is that ducks start using refuge less. Now, they still use it as their central piece of activity, but they spend less time on it. They leave the refuge earlier. They come back later. So is energy important? We feed these ducks. We put all these resources into corn because we think energy is what's driving the system. If energy is driving the system on refuges, I'm about to show you a really nice graph. I don't like showing graphs, but I think I got to show you this one. What I'm going to show you is two situations. If this line goes straight, it means that ducks don't select energy at all when they're on refuges. In other words, they don't care if it's zero energy or the top of the top flooded corn. They just want to be on refuge. If the line looks like that, it means they're very much selecting for energy. That energy is important. It's a limiting factor. Here's what we find when we actually do the analyses for our mallards. They don't care about energy on refuges. That's because there's so much energy elsewhere. Oh, another great graph. Okay. Just follow me here. I'm going to point you to something. I want you to look at that one. This is habitat selection, and this is the interesting part. When we look at habitat selection of our mallards, the least available part of our landscape is heavily and intensively or purposefully managed moist soil. They select that at a greater strength than anything else on our landscape. 11 times greater than its availability. If you compare that to something like flooded corn, it's actually, flooded corn is less selected for. Still selected for, obviously, but not as much. That's starting to tell me a story. That's the ducks that are beginning to tell us the story. There's so much energy out there, a shifting paradigm, if you will. There's so much energy out there, they're not that worried about it. They've got a bunch of rolls in front of them. What they need in this buffet, if you're asking me, is the actual salad part of the salad bar. Now let's look at hunted areas, another unfun graph. But I'm pulling it from students' publications, so you got to be patient with me. All right. Here's a situation where if a bunch of dots I'm going to throw at you come up at the top part, that means the ducks select for it. If they're on the bottom part, they avoid it. And then we have night and day because we know ducks in general avoid hunted areas during the day. That makes sense. They don't want to be shot at. Are you ready? Here we go. Wow, that looks gross. Focus in on the right side of this, and I just want to show you that the far right part of each plot here, that's flooded corn. The far left side of that part is purposefully managed moist soil. Our ducks select for it even on hunted areas at the same intensity. In other words, the ducks are selecting for managed moist soil as intensely and purposefully as they are for flooded corn. So you see, biologists see a managed moist soil and we think this looks beautiful. The public sees this as weeds, and there's a complete misconception because somehow this looks prettier to them. But the ducks are telling us that the other is limiting and just as pretty. So when I see moist soil that looks like a ugly field that has water on it, the ducks are telling you that is the food they need. Yeah, on a cold day like today, a nice hot food like corn, sure, I bet you they're using it today. But on most days, what they need is they need the full buffet. They need the full amount of micronutrients. And if it's that easy for them to get that hot food just in safety, they don't want to make those risky decisions to go elsewhere. So you see this type of grass? If you left it alone and didn't hunt it, you would see ducks there too. So our study is showing that regardless of the season, 6 years in, energy is everywhere on our landscape. Maybe it's a shifting paradigm. 30, 40 years ago, when we came up with this idea that energy is important to ducks, private landowners weren't flooding corn all over the place. Our ducks have no problem finding that. What they can't find is quality. They can find the rolls, but they can't find the greens. And I think, on my pontification side, as an agency, we can start thinking about that private interface and making sure that we're providing what's lacking to the ducks. And the ducks are telling us what is lacking is that quality moist soil. So here are the graduate students that are doing the phase 2 work. Nate Steelman, Corey Highway, and Lydia Holmes, they're here right now. I'm just here to talk about their work, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Do we have any commissioners with questions for Dr. Cohen? Commissioner Davenport.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen. That was very informative. I'm curious if you had any data that back to the water and food and security, when we have one of these big freezes like we had the first 2 weeks of January in 24, if you noticed any migration push on your GPS collared waterfowl.
It's a wonderful question. So the question was, last year there was a deep freeze, a very deep freeze, started around January 10th and continued on for several days where everything locked up. During that time, we had, and it's funny, we actually were looking at this about a couple weeks ago, we had 19 ducks that were actually well above Cape Girardeau, like way above in Illinois, and only one of them pushed further south during that freeze. And none of our ducks that were below Cape Girardeau pushed down any further. So in short, we had hunters absolutely having great hunts during that time. And they were talking about what a great new push of birds that was. That wasn't new birds. In fact, we had put GPS transmitters out and people were shooting those birds, talking about how they were new. They had been there for 3 months. The answer was that cold, deep freeze had pushed birds off of their pattern, had moved them around. And that's what we're having. Now, if that same thing happened in December, I think we would see a strong push like we did opening of this hunting season. We had a lot of birds down here because we had some cold weather. But by January, I really think our data is starting to show that the birds are ready to pull north. They don't want to be pushed down any further.
That's contrary to what most duck hunters think, but thank you.
Commissioner Saltzman.
When you're talking about moist soil, looking for those micronutrients, or is that the bugs in the water? Is that acorns they're feeding on? Kind of what are they looking for to kind of create that salad?
So that's a great question. And the other thing I'll mention about moist soil is you understand that when we put out flooded corn in particular, there's only a couple duck species that actually want to and are capable of eating that, whereas moist soil is available for a lot of other species. So it depends on the species we're talking about. But in general, they're picking up the seeds, not the bugs. Now, when spring migration comes around, this is extremely valuable for all those females that are going to be eating invertebrates to put on protein. But during the hunting season, and early season, they're eating a lot of those seeds. And these are millet seeds, small seeds like that. Some are as small as, 1/10 of a centimeter. And some are as big as a 1/2 of a centimeter, just depends. But it's all annual grass seeds for the most part. And smartweed, which is like a herbaceous plant. Did that answer your question?
Yes, and this is a very scientific one here. How many ducks are you tracking right now?
Yeah, so we're tracking probably close to 200 ducks right now.
Strictly scientific question. Where are they going to be about 6:38 in the morning? If we could put that up on the screen, that would be great.
Yeah, right. I hear you. Well, listen, based on my own hunting success, I wish I knew the answer. Okay.
Commissioner Granbery?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Cohen. Earlier this season, I had the opportunity to hunt with Commissioner Childress and his brother, and we shot a banded greenhead that was from New York State. Most of your GPS tracking is, kind of that northwest track and then back to the southeast.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be safe to say that the duck that was shot, that was banded in New York, if it had a GPS tracker, would probably take that northeast track every year and come back to where it was banded?
I think if you actually saw, here would be my guess. Okay. That duck being from New York probably eventually was near the Great Lakes where it was banded. Yeah, let's just go with Eastern New York, which is around, Great Lakes turf. My guess is it kind of went over a little bit west, if you will, into the Great Lakes and then took the Great Lakes path down and wound up in our area. So in fact, it would have actually been over west and then straight down south. It's very rare, though, that ducks switch flyways. Analysis that a different lab did said about 1% every year, give or take. So you shot a duck that was a very much a rarity.
Purely scientific comment. I think he was tired of paying state income tax in New York.
I hear you on that.
Commissioner Childress?
I got two questions.
Yes, sir.
One of them is what do we do to help with what you're saying, send them back north better? The second one, all the bands we're seeing killed this year are from north, way north. They're on mallards, few canvasbacks. We're not seeing many trackers, or I'm not hearing from many trackers getting killed.
Okay.
How come?
Okay. All right. You see that as a problem. I see it as a good thing. Okay. Now let me think more about the first one was how do we send them back happy and healthy? And one of the big things that philosophically I have a little bit of a concern about with flooded corn in particular is a lot of hunters, the second hunting season ends, pull the boards as quick as they can to get water off the landscape so that you can dry out that area and plant it again. And so ducks that are migrating northward are finding areas that were there and available are no longer there. And so the other benefit of managed moist soil, purposely managed moist soil, is we can keep that water on much longer. So you're talking about sending back up happy and healthy ducks. It starts with having them, their ability to access that. So leaving water on through, for our ducks, March 31st. That's about the time they're fully gone. Now you want to help maybe Louisiana's ducks, maybe a little later. I don't know, but you get what I'm saying. The other one is about, how many of our GPS trackers have been shot. And you have to understand, we have two main, and this is through several things that we've seen, but we have two main ways, times that our ducks die. Opening weekend, our GPS trackers get hammered. And then a cold front with ice pushes them off the patterns. We haven't had a strong ice lockup yet. If this cold front was to really lock them up, grad students would start crying because we're losing a bunch of our data, right? But the truth is, what we are seeing though is that a lot of our most northern GPS birds pushed further south. And that is, I think, from the early cold weather that we had. And that's why you're seeing a lot of those band returns like you are.
I have a question. One of the original slides showed that 25% over winter in an 11-mile circle come back to the
15,
same area,
yeah.
15, and then 50% in a
80 or 90 mile circle.
80, 90. Over the period of the study, do we have enough data to show if those circles have changed locations to the north or to the south? Or
No. Yeah. So we have this, Lydia Holmes is doing a whole project. Her whole thing is about this fidelity, but I'm going to summarize some things. Regardless of weather conditions, the ducks that show fidelity every time to that area. In other words, there's something there that they have picked up on, and we don't see a lot of, had a lot of fidelity this year. I'm not coming back next year. And there tends to be more or less some areas that have more fidelity even within our river system and our river corridors than others. Don't know why, but no, we haven't seen a north-south shift ever. If anything, it's just pretty consistent. Just some areas have more than others. That make sense? Great question.
Yeah, I've got, most of the production here of land or corn and whatever is done to attract ducks. You've talked about what's good for the ducks. What's good for the hunter to attract the ducks?
Yeah.
So is moist soils
So
attracting as much as corn?
yes. And so if you had asked me before we started this study and did all these analyses, confirmation bias would have told me that flooded corn is more attractive and a better way to kill ducks. Our data clearly shows that they are preferred equally on our landscape because corn is just so available. A duck is not going to make a risky decision to access a cornfield that it thinks it's risky, but it might make a risky decision to access a moist soil field right now because it's so limiting. Does that make sense? Did I paradigm it right?
Yeah, I guess the hunters want to know what in your study,
so
what they need to plant.
It's very simple. It's very simple. Besides hunting pressure management, it's a cost-benefit analysis, and I think a little bit of everything is the spice of life. But if you said, I have a place right now, I have unlimited amounts of money, but I have a very small amount of land. What am I going to put? Right now, if I'm in West Tennessee, you told me tomorrow, I'm doing intensively managed moist soil. If I have a little bit more land, I'll have a little spot when it's super cold that I hunt flooded corn, but otherwise I'm in the moist soil. If I have a lot of land, well, then I've got everything. I've got a little bit of wooded wetland for them to sit down on, etc. So I'm starting, in other words, with that moist soil because I think it's most appropriate for most days. And then I'm adding a little bit of flooded corn for cold days, and then I'm going out from there. That's how I'm hunting it.
So if you're running the duck program in Tennessee, what do you plan on our WMAs for hunters?
That's loaded.
You're the expert getting paid. I want to know what your opinion is.
I've got colleagues. All right. I don't know. It depends on our objectives, and it depends on, I guess the question always becomes to me, and I'm not trying to turn the question, but I'm always going to put it this way. Sometimes it's a matter of hunter perception. That's part one, versus what's best for our ducks, part two, versus clearly what our data is saying. Our data is clearly saying that right now, our WMAs, by the way, the best moist soil in Western Tennessee is on our WMAs, on our publicly hunted WMAs, nonetheless. Okay, Pagoda, Thorny Cypress, they're doing a phenomenal job promoting excellent moist soil. So we've got that. I haven't been out to Camden or anything like that recently to see it. But the side note is here, right now the ducks are telling us that what is lacking is this moist soil. So right now I'm shifting a little bit more towards that. And I'm monitoring the private lands. Maybe they start to switch so much to corn or to something else that energy becomes necessary and I put corn back on, but I'm responsive. Did I circumvent your question enough?
No, it's fine. I'm asking it for the benefit of staff when we start talking about what to plant on these WMAs and the hunters protest if we're not planting corn.
I think if you talk to staff, they would, in a lot of places, they would echo what I'm saying, that there's concern about how much corn is, not concern, but there's thoughtfulness about how much corn there is out on private land and how much energy that's providing and how difficult that is to monitor, but how it's theoretically less expensive and probably better quality overall to do moist soil.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
is there any additional benefit to millet versus corn, or would they prefer more soil over millet?
So when you talk about Japanese millet is an agricultural version of an already wild type moist soil. So by putting out Japanese millet, it might as well be called quality moist soil or intensively managed moist soil. It's one and the same.
Okay, so you would think that millet versus corn would be beneficiary?
I think, again, I don't want to speak, it's often case with wildlife management that there is no single one answer, right? It's a paradigm. But a little less corn and a little more millet would be good. Too little corn, like switching all the other way, isn't the answer either.
Does your data showing duck use, like the cold days where we kill ducks and the weather, that's when they go to the corn? Your other data is when they're going, and there's a lot more pretty days than it is bad days.
So
Can you correlate, though, the duck killing when the trackers die? Is it in the millet on the warm days, or is it in the cold days when they get pushed off course?
So if you actually looked at our survival, it is a straight line for most of the time. They're just as likely to be killed in a cornfield versus a millet field versus just a managed moist soil. Okay, except on warm days where they're more likely to be killed in moist soil, and very, very cold days where they're more likely to be killed in flooded corn. And this doesn't, there's other parts of the paradigm of wooded wetlands and all that too, but in general, we're talking about a field could be one of two things.
Any further questions by the commission? Well, I'll just state that it's just an awesome study, and we're very appreciative of all the effort and work. And it's really, a lot of studies give us some information we thought we knew, and we knew most of it. And this study's given us a lot of information, and we had no idea. So,
well, thank you, and I'm incredibly appreciative of the commissions and the directors and the biologists' support. This place has become a second home to all of us, and this agency is a second home to me personally. So, thank you all.
yeah, very thankful. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wright. And we're going to take, in the spirit of stormy weather, to push all these ducks around, we're going to take a very short 10-minute break and get back here at 2:15. All right, welcome back, everybody. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Vice Chair Box of the Fisheries Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Fisheries Committee would call Chief Henegar to the lectern.
Thank you, Vice Chair Box, and thank you, Commission, for making time for the Fisheries Division to bring the proposed changes to both the commercial take of fish and turtles and sport fish proclamations today. So every year we meet with the Commercial Fishing Advisory Committee, the CFAC committee, usually around the May-June timeframe. And in 2024, the major concerns of the CFAC committee kind of revolved around the things that you see here. They asked us in 2023 to review the reservoir temperature data for the Tennessee and Cumberland rivers. They had, some of the buyers of paddlefish eggs had been experiencing late in the season that those eggs were not viable for sale. So they were worried that paddlefish were being harvested at the end of the season and they could not use those eggs to sell. We experienced some declines in populations on Kentucky Lake and Chickamauga Lake in 2009 through 2013. And we're in the process of trying to rebuild those populations. They didn't want any increased mortality on those fish if the eggs weren't viable. So also they had concerns with harvest of skipjack herring at Pickwick Dam and at Cumberland River Steam Plant. This has been a concern of the agency for quite a while. The increased harvest of sport anglers and bait dealers for the sale of these fish for catfish bait has increased over the years. So we're well aware of that. They also wanted to open the Duck River to Bakerfield Road Bridge to whip setting for invasive carp, July through October, and also allow 5-inch gill nets for whip setting of carp. We expressed that we would look at both of these concerns or requests and come back to them in 2025. They also expressed issues with the move of license to a 365 license. It's causing some issues with some of the federal laws that they have to deal with in exporting of fish in the CITES program. And if you remember, we took care of this last month in the rule change for 1660-1-28, the permitting and license fees. And then also there was a request to change the maximum size limit for catfish to 36 inches instead of 34. We've been aware of this, and we're also aware that catfish populations across the state differ. And we're taking steps to collect more data, both from commercial fishermen and sport fishermen, to look at this in the future if needed. So the 2025 recommendations from the agency for regulation changes, we have to update scientific name of bowfin. I touched on this last month with the rule change preview. American Fisheries Society changed some scientific names of species. We just need to change this to reflect those changes. Change in the ending date for paddlefish season for Kentucky Lake from April 7th to March 31st. And that's based on that review of temperature data that we did on both river systems. Kentucky Lake was the only one that was getting over that 58-degree temperature late in the season. The rest of the reservoirs seem to be in an okay place right now to leave seasons as is. So, and then the agency also is recommending an increase in mesh size for gill nets to be used for harvest of paddlefish from 6 inches to 7 inches on square for reservoirs open to paddlefish harvest. This, like I said, will help with trying to recover those populations of paddlefish that had declined during that time frame from 2009 to 2013. And then, as I said, we have already moved the commercial license purchase date to July 1st. So that's the Fisheries Division's recommendations for changes in 2025. This is just covering some of the places in the proclamation those changes will actually happen. This is Section 2, General Provisions, and you can see here the name change, the changes to add Kentucky Lake to the exceptions for the change in season. And then here's some changes just for grammatical, some grammatical changes. We moved away from license types and numbers a couple years ago when we moved to the Brant system for licenses, and that was not taken out of this proclamation. We're doing that now. And then you can also see the change from 6 to 7 inch mesh size, and also the clarification of paddlefish season for Kentucky Lake, and the Mississippi River is also an exception here. And then again, in the gill net definition, there's that change from mesh size of 6 inches to 7 inches. And that would be all the changes for the commercial proclamation that we have at this time. And also, we'll let you know that we're starting a comment period for this proclamation as well as sport fish on January 15th that will run through February 15th. That'll be on our website and available to the public for comment. Commissioners, that's all I have for the commercial.
Any questions, comments?
Question.
Commissioner Butt.
Can you back up, Jason, one more time?
Yes, sir.
On this particular slide, after you talked about the April 1st, I noticed these are all still November 20th or April 7th. Is that consistent with what you're trying to do, or have I missed something here?
That's all the reservoirs other than Kentucky Lake and the Mississippi River. The April 7th is for all other reservoirs. If you look down, Kentucky Lake paddlefish season starts noon on November 20th and runs through March 31st. And then the Mississippi River is noon on November 1st through April 15th. And those dates are set based on those water temperatures.
All right, thank you.
We'll continue to monitor those, and if things change in the future, we'll bring other changes back to you at that time.
Other questions? Commissioner Cox.
Jason, would you talk a little bit about going to a 7-inch? I've gotten some discussion about the net cost to fishermen to change these nets, and how y'all have discussed that, and also talk about mortality of sport fish because of the 6-inch nets.
I can't give you any hard numbers on that. I know there's several fishermen that use 7-inch mesh nets now due to the bycatch, and reducing bycatch makes it a little easier throughout the day. They're not having to handle as many fish. They're still able to catch the fish that they're looking for, but it reduces some of that bycatch. As far as the netting material, we talked to the commercial fishermen at CFAC. They expressed a concern with the cost of retooling with 7-inch mesh for a lot of them. We have incentivized that by purchasing some 7-inch mesh. The agency purchased that mesh, and we'll make it available to those fishermen. About 100 pounds per fisherman, I believe, is what we settled on. And so we have incentivized that change as well.
Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Butt.
Has there been any discussion or consideration for a grace period for conversion from the 6 to the 7?
We did. This regulation currently is set for an August 1 changeover, and we we should be able to have that netting in the next month or so to provide to the commercial fishermen. It should provide some time before the November start period for paddle fishing that they can get tooled up. We don't feel like it needs to be pushed out any longer than that, with the incentive of the netting as well.
So for those fishermen who have considerable supply of 6-inch, wouldn't an extended 6-inch into the next season for both type to help with the transition?
It could. What we're going to see is during those warm water periods, you have a high mortality rate, and the eggs are not viable. 6-inch mesh does cause a little more mortality during those warm water periods, where that 7-inch wouldn't entangle fish as bad, and you could be able to release those fish to be much more viable.
So how long has the 6-inch been in place?
I would have to call on my commercial fishing coordinator, Eric Gaines, to answer some of those more detailed questions.
The 6-inch gill net has been in place for paddle fishing since early 2000s. It's either 2003 or 2002 when it was put in place. And it moved from 5-inch to 6-inch at that time.
Okay. So with monetary outlay for conversion, wouldn't it make sense to maybe have a transition for both for maybe 6 months into this next season? Or is there enough time from, how much does 100 pounds of 7-inch netting represent? I mean, how many nets would that be?
That, I believe in some of our calculations, that meets that 12 net standard that they're restricted to for paddlefish harvest. So you're replacing the 12 nets that they're allowed to use.
And for those fishermen who have 100+ nets, that's going to be a pretty steep conversion amount. That's the only reason I asked that question.
Okay. We can look into that more and discuss it with CFAC further during this comment period.
All right. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, Jason, sport fish.
Move on to sport fish proclamation then. Okay. So here's the proposed changes to the Sport Fish Proclamation 2502. Starting off, unfortunately, Alabama bass in their native range provide a truly quality fishery throughout Alabama, Coosa River system down there. When those fish have been moved into other areas across the southeast, they've caused a lot of problems. One of those problems is possibly the eradication of smallmouth bass. We've seen it in several reservoirs across the southeast in North Carolina, Georgia, and South Carolina. They have impacts on largemouth bass populations in those states as well. Tennessee Wildlife Resources Region 3 reservoir crews first found Alabama bass in Parksville Reservoir around 2001. And over the last 20 years, we've watched as these fish have been moved throughout the Tennessee River system, likely a lot of times by anglers moving those. I will remind everybody that it is illegal to stock any fish into public waters in the state of Tennessee without the approval of the director. Here's two examples of another problem this causes. Alabama bass readily hybridize with both smallmouth and spotted bass that are native to Tennessee, making identification for regulations. The regulations I'm going to be proposing here to ease that burden both on our law enforcement, our biologists, and our anglers to make it a little easier to identify these fish and regulate our bass populations in water where they've been introduced. So ground zero for Alabama bass influence has been Parksville Reservoir. Like I said, 2001, we first recognized those fish had been stocked in there, and we've watched that system change over time. Parksville did not have a huge smallmouth bass population. It was mostly largemouth. Over that time, we've seen that Alabama bass is now the majority of the bass caught in Parksville. So the other thing you'll realize from some of these slides that I show, I've got a current and proposed. If you look at the current, there's a lot of complexity to these bass regulations. We're trying to manage each reservoir for the best situation to provide a quality fishery for bass. These proposed regulations is an attempt to make these regulations a little simpler and also alleviate the issues with identification of smallmouth. So at Parksville, we want to keep the largemouth bass 15-inch size limit, 5-fish creel, and then we'll be lumping smallmouth, spotted bass, and Alabama bass and all their hybrids together. We want to continue the no creel, no size limit on this to promote harvest of these fish and hopefully extend the quality of our largemouth bass by taking some of those fish out. This being ground zero and really our only pure source of Alabama bass, we would like to propose no live transport of any black bass away from Park Reservoir. We have a similar regulation for catfish for commercial harvest across the state, and that would hopefully keep anglers from moving these pure Alabama bass and their hybrids elsewhere throughout the state. So the next three reservoirs I'm going to be talking about is Gunnersville, Nickajack, and Chickamauga. All three of these reservoirs have really quality smallmouth bass fisheries. We instituted an 18-inch minimum length limit on smallmouth, and those fisheries has really done well. Due to the introduction of Alabama bass, it's hard in these reservoirs for anglers, especially tournament anglers and tournament directors, to meet this 18-inch minimum size limit because of confusion in identification. So we're looking to simplify that. We want to keep the 15-inch minimum length, 5-fish creel in combination for all black bass, and then for smallmouth spotted Alabama bass and their hybrids, we have no minimum length limit, but we want to only allow one of those fish to be over 16 inches per day. That way we can try to promote that quality fishery and maintain that as long as we can. We know that out on that fishery, but we would like to maintain that quality fishery as long as possible. And Nickajack, you'll see that the current is a little bit different, but we're still, that's the same regulation with the quality smallmouth spotted bass Alabama hybrid 1/16. So, and then Chickamauga, same regulation. Current regulations is a little bit different. Just wanted to make sure I pointed that out. The next four reservoirs, starting with Watts Bar, we're looking to manage with a simple black bass regulation, 5-fish creel in combination, 15-inch minimum length. This should clean up and make that regulation a lot simpler for Watts Bar, as well as Fort Loudon, Tellico, Howie, and Pickwick. We see heavy influence of Alabama bass in these systems. They do not have that trophy smallmouth bass component to them, and we feel like we can manage with this simplified regulation. This is aside from the Alabama bass situation. Tellico River, if several of the commissioners you may remember, we did an exploitation on smallmouth bass statewide in some of our rivers and streams over the last couple of years. Out of that study, we found out that that Tellico River was really not seeing a lot of harvest, and then also that we weren't reaching the quality fishery that the protective length limit, 13 to 17 inch protective length limit, was trying to promote. So we're 8 wide black bass, 5 fish with no minimum length, just to simplify. Marrowbone Lake is one of our agency lakes, and it is currently, it's kind of a similar situation. It's currently managed under a 14 length limit slot with only 1/8. We're not seeing that this regulation is producing quality bass fishery, and we're actually seeing that it may be bass crowded. So we're looking at a 10 fish daily creel with no minimum length limit. Davy Crockett Lake is also one of our agency lakes. And we went to that 10 fish daily creel, no minimum length several years ago, seeing some better quality fish and improvements in growth. We'd like to move that to a no daily creel limit and only 1 black bass over 18 inches per day to try to protect some of those faster growing fish, produce a little bit better quality fishery. Lake Halford is one of our agency lakes, and it also included in the Bill Dance Signature Lake program. We started some intensive management there about 3 years ago, and as part of that management, we weren't planning on managing crappie, so we took off the daily creel and the minimum. We realized that the crappie fishery responded well, and we've got some increased growth rates there. So we're wanting to propose a 20 fish daily creel limit with only 5 crappie over 12 inches per day to try to continue to harvest some of those smaller crappie and produce a quality fishery here. This is only a 1,000-acre lake, so it could experience some increased pressure if successful fishing trips and quality crappies caught. Just trying to continue to manage this as one of the Bill Dance lakes and provide The next proposal is we've been working with the city of Gatlinburg, and they're wanting to restrict use of the West Prong Little Pigeon Bobby Wilson Free Fishing Day, and they're wanting to close the section of river from Maples Lane upstream to Great Smoky Mountains National Park boundary. It's about half a mile, a little over half a mile, and they're wanting to close that to anglers 16 and over until 11 a.m. After that to everyone, provide an area for their youth fishing event. Is the simply changes that were brought about by some of the changes. American Fisheries Society, they changed the name for largemouth bass and Florida bass. We just need to show that in our proclamations now. With that, that is all the proposals I have for sport fish.
Questions? Anyone? Okay, Mr. Chairman, that concludes the business of the Fisheries Committee.
Thank you, Commission.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Box. It's a lot of information. We look forward to voting on that in the near future. Before I turn over to Commissioner Vaney, I would like to say that in my term on this commission, we've done a really wonderful job of communication. We have our annual report. We have, great team led by Emily Buck. We got our newest legislative affairs, Blair Beatty. And so I think as we continue to grow the opportunities of this commission, I think it's, the Legacy Award is one of them. And I think we've got a couple items on this Chairman Devaney's committee here to discuss. And so I think it's really a good thing this commission has these awards and policies in place to not only we talk a lot about what we do with fisheries and and ducks and stuff. And these things are just equally as important, that we have something to go by, or not. You have just, can you imagine if you didn't have a creel limit or a duck limit or different things on our reservoirs and our fields? So I think these are all really good things, and I appreciate Commissioner Devaney taking charge on this, and look forward to some spirited debate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As everybody knows, or as the commission knows, we've been working for some time on a policy about naming of assets that are under the commission's purview, such as WMAs, such as lakes and other assets. And General Counsel Grimes is going to go over that. But before he does, I kind of just want to remind everybody who's on the Legislative and Public Affairs Committee, myself, Stan Butt, who's the vice chair, Brad Box, Chip Saltzman, Hank Wright, Rhonda Moody. As Chairman Granbery discussed, this is an important issue, and General Counsel Grimes is going to give us an overview, and then we'll discuss it among the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I believe that we got our wires crossed on having printouts, but I believe we're going to be able to put this on the screen, or at least put the language on the screen. So to recap, the purpose of the policy is to establish the criteria and process for the honorific naming of wildlife management areas, lakes, fishing areas, boat ramps, and access areas, and other assets under the jurisdiction of the agency or otherwise located on agency property. So on that front, I've been kind of emailing this to all of you, and it's been kind of growing over the last few months, and as we try to address those separate concerns that may have come about. So we think this is at a point to really begin and talking about it more in the committee process. So the first page, which I know all of you have seen before, I want to spend I won't take much, just getting to the areas that I think are to draw your attention to as the final changes that I've kind of heard separately from you all. So we've added the statement, the Fish and Wildlife Commission shall, in its sole and absolute discretion, have the right to determine the terms and conditions associated with each naming. After talking to Commissioner Little, we feel like this was appropriate to at least say and not allude to, so we just flat out said it. And I think that makes this a stronger document. The blue language was actually existing language about kind of what those maxims that we consider when you're looking to either add a name, remove a name. So we did add the 1 point of the Fish and Wildlife Commission considers it in the best previously approved name. I think that's an important thing to do. And just for context, most of this policy is built off of what the University of Tennessee and its board does. So Commissioner Box is probably very familiar with most of this document. We've added some language to the process area, and Wildlife Commission shall effectuate a naming by proclamation, identifying the asset to be named by a supermajority vote. And I put in parentheses a minimum of 9 of the 13 appointed regularly scheduled meeting. One of you came to me before the meeting started and said, what if somebody abstains? And what happens if someone's not here? And obviously that changes this dynamic a little bit. And I'll leave that to you all's discretion. And then finally, several of you brought this issue up that we need sort of public comment period. So I've offered the attached language that to give the members of the public an appropriate time to comment on the action. And quite frankly, I heard 30 days, 90 days, 60 days. So I kind of split the baby based on what the comment for rules is. When the agency prompts a rule that requires a minimum of 45 days notice to the public so that they can make comment, that's where that came from. Honestly, that's it. And if you you to where you need to be, but Mr. Chairman, that kind of gives the high points of it.
Okay. So we'll open it up to discussion with committee members first, and then after that, after committee members, we'll open it up to the full commission if they have any questions or comments.
I've got one comment. if that's all right.
Commissioner Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I agree with council. We just got a huge responsibility to this committee and this commission, but also future commissions and the agency to create a lasting and comprehensive naming policy that it causes us to have transparency and public trust. So I'm excited about it. I know it's been in the work for a long, long, long time, but one thing that you brought up, council, that I thought about is with regard to the public comment period. It seems to me that 45 days is plenty for a public comment period if we're naming an asset that doesn't have a name. But if we're changing or altering or deleting or adding to or making an edit to a name, it just seems to me like for public trust that a 90-day waiting period is much more appropriate. I don't think it hurts anything. Gives us time to contact any people that it might be named after or and to consider it further. So with that in mind, I'd like to make that, I'd like to propose an amendment that we do that if it's 45 days is sufficient, if it doesn't have a name and we're creating a new name for it, but if we're altering or editing or any of those things, that we have a 90-day waiting period or public comment period, sorry. So that's my amendment that I'm proposing.
So that's a motion?
That's a motion. Yep. Thank you.
Is there a second? Second. Brad Box seconds. Do we have discussion on the amendment? Oh, Chip Saltzman, sorry. Do we have a discussion on the amendment? I think Commissioner, no discussion on the amendment. Having seen none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, ayes have it. So now we're back to the full proposal. Are there any other comments on this proposal of the committee? Are there any comments from the commission? Commissioner Cox.
Would you go back to the notification slide for heirs or families or whatever? What is the, how are you going to measure the good faith effort? What do you need to see to say, okay, we've given it a good shot. We can't find them or whatever it is. What's going to be the measurement of that?
I think you're directed to me. I don't know that there necessarily is a measurement. I think that's up to you all if you want to outline specific things that need to occur, whether you direct the agency to find people. That at the minimum, that's probably, as a lawyer, that's probably what I would do, is I would look to find out where a family right now and make some sort of attempt, whether it be a letter or something, to try to contact them. But I don't know that there's a hard and fast rule unless you all want to establish one.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Davenport.
Thank you. I might make a suggestion that just to, I guess, not protect the commission, but to have a record of that it may be a certified letter.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I wouldn't do anything but that, Mr. Commissioner.
Yeah. Do we have any other comments?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner.
Would it be appropriate to add to that letter that, if no response is received after a certain number of days, then this would go into effect?
Generally, that's how I would write a letter and asked, I probably would make some sort of statement that please contact us. If you haven't contacted us within X period of time, we'll deem either waived or are indifferent to the suggested change. That's the way I would approach it if I was writing the letter.
So does that need to be added to the terminology, or is that just accepted?
That's a fair question for you all to decide. If you all want to hit those points that you and Commissioner Cox said, we can certainly build those into the language of the policy.
Anyone else? Chairman Granbery.
Yeah, I'd just like to say for the public in this commission, I sort of champion this policy, some things I saw in other commissions that I'm involved with, and I think it's just imperative of this commission to protect the agency's integrity, to have these things in place for generations to come, just as we work through it. And I just really admire the work of our general counsel, the work of this commission, and their interest in it, and their questions and their suggestions and their comments. And they're all great questions and comments. To Commissioner Butt's comment, I think if I'm not a committee member unless I'm automatically committee member's chairman, but maybe if the motion, Commissioner Wright, could be amended to, if you have this letter that the general counsel writes, that you have some sort of requirements within the letter that have to be met. I'm not sure what those are, but we could maybe ask General Counsel Grimes to give us something in advance of the full vote of the commission. That would be my only kind of outline suggestion, because I don't, just a letter, they get the letter, they don't respond. That sounds great, but I think to protect everybody, now and in the future, if you had something in writing in the files to say, well, look, here it is, you responded and it's all great. And you, as a commission, we met the criteria that was outlined in the policy, and we stand up and we feel good about whatever change we make, whatever name we add to or delete, and that we did that. So I would just want maybe Commissioner Wright, if that is, could amend your 90-day amendment to include something like that as to Commissioner Butt's suggestion on the letter.
Yeah, I'll ask. All right, I'm gonna let you state that, Counsel. We're discussing how to edit that.
So I think if Commissioner Wright will withdraw his motion for an amendment, restate that amendment, but add in Commissioner Granbery's recommendation, which I'm confident that I can accomplish this, and then take the vote on that new amendment. And then if the committee is so desires, go ahead and move that, refer that to the full commission with the secondary vote. And that way the commission can take it up the next time it meets, and it will be mostly ready. I think this is easy to do.
Okay, I'll get to that in 1 second. I think that the statement about the good faith effort to attempt to notify the honorees and their heirs or their heirs, I think that's a good reason for the 90 days, but it also stands the test of time. So if we say certified letter and there's no postal service in 20 years, or, it really puts the onus on us to perform a good faith effort to contact all of them. So I like the wording, but I'd like to withdraw my amendment and restate it just to include, it's a 45-day wait period if we're naming a new asset. It's a 90-day wait period if we're altering, editing, adding to, deleting a name from an existing asset, and include Commissioner Granbery's recommendation, which Counsel you have. Okay.
Do we have a second on Commissioner Wright's amendment? Do you second that? Oh, Chip Saltzman, Commissioner Saltzman second. So do we need, we want to discuss the amendment? Any commissioner on the committee want to discuss? All right, seeing none. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Ayes have it. So now we're on to the full amended policy. Do we have any discussion on that before we move to a vote? All right, do we have a second for the amended policy that will be forwarded to the full commission? Do we have a second? Oh, Chip Saltzman, thank you. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Do I have a motion? Yeah, so Chip Saltzman's made a motion and I second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Ayes have it. All right. Thank you for the refresher in Robert's Rules of Order.
Yeah, just a point of, just for everybody to know, I think everybody knows we've got a winter storm coming. We've postponed the meeting for tomorrow and it's rescheduled for February 24th at 9 a.m. at the headquarters in Region 1 office in Nashville. I'm sorry, January 24th. And Region 2 office in Nashville, you know, the one right below headquarters there in Nashville. But it'll be on January 24th at 9 a.m. And we've noticed that up. It's all our website and stuff. So we'll be the full commission. It'll be a full commission meeting, and we'll be taking that up at that meeting at that time for a vote of the full commission.
All right. At this time, I want to recognize Commissioner Stan Budd. He wants to talk about the creation of the R3 Outstanding Leadership Award. Commissioner Budd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In recognition of the emphasis that our director mentioned early in this meeting in reference to the R3 program, starting in 2025, the Fish and Wildlife Commission is creating the R3 Outstanding Leadership Award. The award is created to recognize Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commissioner, former commissioner, or outstanding leader who has actively committed themselves to furthering the cause of the R3 program. What is R3, you ask? R3 is recruitment, retention, and reactivation, a nationwide movement to increase or maintain participation in and support for hunting, fishing, and the shooting sports. Across the nation, state wildlife agencies engage in R3 programming designed to recruit new hunters and anglers, retain existing ones, and reactivate those who have allowed their license to lapse. To expand the R3 outreach, our agency is helping fund partner organizations, including the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Foundation, the Tennessee Wildlife Federation, the Tennessee Farm Bureau Federation, Tennessee Future Farmers of America, FFA as it's known, 4-H, and other similar organizations across the state in promoting the goals of the R3 program. To learn more about TWRA and its involvement in R3, you can go to our webpage, our website, click on the 2023 annual report, which has a lot of information about it, and read about the partnerships for R3, shooting sports and ranges, outreach events, and boater and hunter education. That concludes my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Butt. I'll take your presentation as a motion, and as chair, I will second it. Do we have any discussion from committee members? Having seen none, any full commission? Having seen none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Ayes have it. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our business.
Thank you very much, Chairman Devaney. And Commissioner Butt, thank you for bringing this forward. I think this is a fantastic award, and I look forward to implementing this in later on in 2025. As I noted earlier, our meeting for tomorrow is scheduled January 24th. And in respect to Commissioner Butt, who can't make that meeting, we're going to defer the full vote of the commission on the R3 award to the full meeting in Nashville on February 21st. So we'll do the naming policy in 2 weeks, and then in February at the full commission meeting, we'll do the R3 award. And thanks again, Commissioner Butt. I think this is a wonderful idea. And at this time, I'll turn over to Commissioner Cox for a Budget Committee report.
Chairman, Deputy Director Frank Fiss, Director of Business Operations.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, so at this time, it's not gonna work. Okay. At this time of the year, the most recent data available is for our closed month of November 2024. And I'll go through the boating fund, and our registration income is just slightly high going through the year, about on track. Our expense to budget, we're saving a little money on the boating side for various reasons, but we're certainly not overspending that budget. On the wildlife side, we're up a little bit on license income. I think we're still feeling a little recovery from the 365. We kind of thought we were there because we had done the number of licenses sold had come up a little bit, but it came up even more in so far this year. Now that could tail off. And again, our expense to budget, we're right on track, slightly behind what we thought we would spend in the wildlife fund. On the wetlands acquisition fund, we started the month with 25 million. We're 25 with FY25 with 25 million. We're collecting about 2 million a month. So year to date, we're around 8.4 million. We've spent out, or we've been able to take in 10 million for projects that we're doing. We are, this isn't all land acquisition. There's also a lot of maintenance of lands that is how we spend a lot of these dollars. So as a balance, we have about 23 million. And lastly, here's our Treasury invested funds. In November, our bonds, all of them recovered to a positive position. In other words, their value is back to at least what they were when we bought them. We still have pretty low interest accumulated over time because some of those bonds have been in place for 6-7 years. But anyway, that's where we're at. You see the balances for the lifetime fund is still around 74 million. We're selling a lot of lifetime licenses right now. Our watchable license plate, that's still coming in steady. You'll notice on the wildlife fund, we are up to 71 million. Usually that's around 61 million. That's because we got 10 million from an appropriation for the Bill Dance Signature Lakes. And that finally showed up in our ledger in November of this year. So now we too can start earning interest on $10 million while we do the projects to get that program underway. But that money will be passed through. Basically, that won't offset any other demands we have for in other words, we can't use that for salaries to cushion our needs that we were talking about when we said we need license increases. So the boating fund is sitting right at $20 million, and our SPIF, our state pooled investment fund, is still earning about 4.7%.
Anyone have any questions? Thank you, Frank.
All right, thank you.
That's all we have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Cox. And I know there's a lot of moving parts as it relates to budget, and this commission has met them head on and tackled them. And I think the future is very promising for the agency as we work through our budget issues. So at this time, we're coming to the close of the meeting, and it's an opportunity for anybody in the public that would like to speak. And we have Mr. Larry Overstreet, who has requested to speak. And please come to the mic and state your name, and we'll give you 3 minutes, sir.
Larry Overstreet, Waynesboro, Tennessee. I'm not a public speaker, and my hearing's not good. So if y'all holler at me, if you need to speak to me, holler at me. But anyway, I've been a commercial fisherman for 20 years and a road paddle fish permit holder. And I've got a big investment in 6-inch gill nets, a huge investment. I've got way over 200 nets in my shop. And going to the 7-inch webbing would really have a big effect on me. I ain't got many years left in this, but it would affect, I'd say it would cut my catch in half when I go fishing, at least, what money I make, because there's so many fish that go through that 7-inch that I normally would catch. And there's just a whole lot of issues about it. And the last 20 years that I've been in this, we've had 21 days took away from us already. The buyers normally control when season ends. If they do get bad eggs, they go ahead and cut us off. They won't buy our eggs, And there's just a whole lot of issues. I can't think of all of them, but it's a very short period of time that we get to fish during 5 months due to water conditions. Most of the time the water's running way too hard. You put your nets out there and all you go home with is a big load of trash, a load of leaves. And it's just, we don't have much time to fish. And it's an extremely hard job. It's harsh weather. And this is what they're trying to take away from us. It would really hurt me. And I don't know how to put it, but the decline in paddlefish, I think that's the only thing you're seeing is what's on paper, because we haven't had fishing conditions. The paddlefish are coming back. They're out there in the water. And I've even had some discussions with people that knows, and they say they're coming back, plenty of them. And there's some of these people that fishing for carp, they're wanting, I've got a question on that. Are they allowed to fish for carp and paddlefish at the same time? That's a concern of mine, where they got two different size nets out there. They're going to be allowed to catch those smaller fish that's be in their carp net where it go right through our 7-inch net. That's a concern of mine. And anybody, I may try to get a hold of a couple of you guys, talk to you about some things. I'm just not a public speaker, but it would really hurt me if these rules change. And I would love to talk to you, some of y'all on the phone. If you got any questions for me?
Have any questions for Mr. Overstreet on the commission? Mr. Cox, did you have a?
No, I'd like for him to get an answer to his question about.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that our fisheries head is right here to the left. And if you could meet with Mr. Henegar after the meeting, that would be very helpful to him and to you. And not, y'all can talk the talk a lot quicker than we can. So our head of fisheries right here, and we appreciate your time, sir, and look forward to getting some answers for you.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody on the commission have any other questions or comments? That brings us to the close. I just encourage everybody to travel safe. Check your website notifications. We've rescheduled to the 24th for the regular scheduled meeting of tomorrow. And then, of course, we have our regular scheduled meetings in February, both in Nashville. And so at that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.